A new dawn in Geneva, a city known for its diplomatic significance, sets the stage for a pivotal moment in international relations. Delegates from the United States and China, representing the world's two largest economies, re-engage in trade talks after a prolonged period of tension and uncertainty. The world watched with bated breath as high-level officials from both nations convened in Geneva on May 10, 2025. This meeting was not just another diplomatic engagement. It was a critical juncture that could redefine the future of global trade. The trade talks, taking place against a backdrop of escalating tensions and a protracted trade war, represented a glimmer of hope for improved relations between the world's two largest economies. The stakes were incredibly high, with the potential to either ease or exacerbate the economic strain felt worldwide. For months, the global economy had been held hostage to the uncertainty and volatility stemming from the trade dispute. Stock markets fluctuated wildly and the flow of goods between nations slowed to a crawl, affecting businesses and consumers alike. The Geneva talks, while not expected to yield any immediate breakthroughs, were seen as an essential first step in breaking the impasse and fostering a more constructive dialogue. The negotiators were tasked with the monumental challenge of finding common ground amidst a sea of differences. The stakes were high, with the outcome of the negotiations having far-reaching implications, not only for the United States and China, but for the entire global trading system. A successful dialogue could stabilize markets and restore confidence, while failure could plunge the world into deeper economic turmoil. The world held its breath, hoping that these talks would mark a turning point in the fraught relationship between the two superpowers. Journalists and analysts speculated endlessly, each hoping for a positive outcome that could signal a new era of cooperation. All eyes were on Geneva, eager to see if dialogue could pave the way for a more stable and prosperous future. The picturesque city, often a symbol of peace and diplomacy, now stood as the backdrop for a potentially historic moment. The weight of expectation rested heavily on the shoulders of the negotiators as they embarked on this critical mission to mend fences and rebuild trust. Their efforts could very well determine the economic trajectory of not just their own nations, but the entire world. The Geneva talks were not an isolated event, but rather the latest chapter in a long and complex history of trade relations between the United States and China. The trade war, which began in 2025 under the Trump administration, had escalated dramatically, with both sides imposing tariffs exceeding 100% on each other's goods. This tit-for-tat exchange of punitive measures had sent shockwaves through the global economy. The trade war was more than just a dispute over tariffs. It reflected deeper concerns about China's economic practices, its growing technological prowess, and its ambitions on the global stage. The United States had long accused China of unfair trade practices, including intellectual property theft, forced technology transfers, and currency manipulation. The trade war had resulted in significant economic pain on both sides. Businesses had been forced to grapple with supply chain disruptions, higher costs, and reduced access to key markets. Consumers had also felt the pinch, as tariffs led to higher prices for a wide range of goods. Leading the United States delegation to the Geneva talks were two seasoned negotiators, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer. Bessent, known for his deep understanding of financial markets and his pragmatic approach to negotiations, was tasked with addressing the macroeconomic imbalances that had fueled the trade war. Greer, a seasoned trade lawyer with a reputation for toughness, was responsible for tackling the thorny issue of China's trade practices. On the Chinese side, the delegation was headed by Vice Premier He Lifeng, a rising star in the Chinese Communist Party and a close confidant of President Xi Jinping. He, with his extensive experience in economic policy and his deep understanding of the U.S.-China relationship, was seen as a formidable negotiator, capable of representing China's interests forcefully, but also with a degree of pragmatism. The meeting between these high-level officials was shrouded in secrecy, with no official statements released following the first day of talks. However, sources close to the negotiations suggested that the atmosphere had been businesslike but cordial, with both sides expressing a willingness to engage in constructive dialogue. Section 4, Trump's shadow looms, a total reset, or more of the same. While the Biden administration had sought to distance itself from the confrontational approach of the Trump era, The shadow of former President Donald Trump loomed large over the Geneva talks. The Biden team aimed to establish a more diplomatic and measured tone, hoping to reset the strained relations between the U.S. and China. However, the legacy of Trump's aggressive policies and rhetoric was hard to ignore, casting a long shadow over the proceedings. Trump, who had made his hardline stance on China a cornerstone of his presidency, wasted no time in weighing in on the negotiations. His approach had been characterized by tariffs, sanctions, and a general air of hostility, which had significantly impacted the global trade landscape. As the Geneva talks progressed, Trump's influence was palpable, with many wondering if his policies would continue to shape the future of U.S.-China relations. In a characteristically bombastic post on his social media platform, Truth Social, Trump claimed that the talks had achieved a total reset, and that great progress had been made in a friendly but constructive meeting. His post was filled with his usual bravado, painting a picture of success and cooperation that many found hard to believe. The former president's words were seen by some as an attempt to remain relevant and influential in the ongoing political discourse. Trump's intervention, while not entirely unexpected, added another layer of complexity to the already delicate negotiations. The diplomats and officials involved had to navigate not only the substantive issues at hand, but also the political undercurrents stirred by Trump's comments. This added pressure made the task of reaching a meaningful agreement even more challenging. His claims of a total reset were met with skepticism by many observers, who noted that Trump had a history of exaggerating his accomplishments and making pronouncements that were not supported by facts. Analysts pointed out that the reality on the ground was far more complex and that any significant progress would require sustained effort and genuine cooperation from both sides. Despite Trump's attempts to claim credit for the talks, the Biden administration was quick to downplay his role. They emphasized their own strategies and efforts to engage with China, focusing on building a framework for long-term stability and mutual benefit. The administration's approach was to move away from the confrontational tactics of the past and towards a more collaborative and strategic engagement. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki dismissed Trump's comments as not helpful and reiterated the administration's commitment to engaging with China from a position of strength. She highlighted the importance of addressing key issues such as trade imbalances, intellectual property rights, and cybersecurity through constructive dialogue. Psaki's statements underscored the administration's resolve to pursue a path that prioritizes American interests while seeking to foster a stable and productive relationship with China. Section 5. America's Objectives, Fair Trade and Economic Security. The Biden administration entered the Geneva talks with a clear set of objectives, seeking to address what it saw as unfair Chinese trade practices and to protect American economic interests. These objectives were not just about numbers and trade balances, they were about ensuring a level playing field for American businesses and workers. The administration believed that by addressing these issues, they could create a more equitable global trading system. At the top of the U.S. agenda was the issue of China's massive trade surplus with the United States, which had ballooned to over $295 billion. This trade imbalance was seen as a significant threat to American jobs and industries, and the administration was determined to find ways to reduce it. They argued that this surplus was not just a result of market forces, but was also driven by unfair trade practices that needed to be addressed. The U.S. also sought to address long-standing concerns about China's intellectual property theft, forced technology transfers, and subsidies for state-owned enterprises. These practices were seen as undermining the competitiveness of American companies and stifling innovation. The administration aimed to push for stronger protections for intellectual property and to ensure that American companies could compete on a fair and equal footing. Beyond these specific trade issues, the U.S. also aimed to engage China on broader economic and strategic challenges, including China's growing military assertiveness in the Indo-Pacific region and its human rights record. The administration believed that these issues were interconnected and that addressing them was essential for maintaining global stability and security. They sought to build a coalition of allies to confront these challenges collectively. The Biden administration recognized that the U.S.-China relationship was multifaceted and that addressing the trade imbalance was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. They understood that any progress on trade would need to be part of a broader strategy that included diplomatic, economic, and security dimensions. This holistic approach was seen as essential for achieving long-term stability and prosperity. The U.S. delegation was under pressure to demonstrate that it could achieve concrete results from the talks, both to appease domestic critics who argued that China had not been held accountable for its trade practices and to reassure allies who were looking to the U.S. to provide leadership in confronting China's growing economic and geopolitical clout. The stakes were high, and the administration knew that the outcomes of these talks would have far-reaching implications for the future of international trade and global economic security. Section 6. China's perspective: seeking respect and a level playing field. China, for its part, entered the Geneva talks with its own set of priorities, seeking to protect its economic interests and secure its place on the world stage. China resented what it perceived as U.S. attempts to contain its rise and bristled at accusations of unfair trade practices.